Hey, greetings everybody. This is Jeff Hester with SoCal Hiker, and I'd like to welcome you to the March Six Pack of Peaks live stream for our Explorer and Trailblazer challengers. That's you. So welcome and greetings. I know that there's only a few people on yet. Let's see who we got here. Hi, Christy and Kate and Georgina and Versavino or CXC Beast. Thank you for joining tonight. And I really appreciate the fact that folks asked questions in the Q&A section. This is the third time we've done this, and it's the second time using this system. We're using a system called Crowdcast. And it's really cool to see how that works when people post their topic ideas or questions, and you can vote them up and things like that. So I really appreciate the fact that you do that. It helps me make sure that you get your questions answered if I don't see them in the chat or we don't get a chance to cover all of that information. I'm going to do my very best to kind of go through some of those questions and get them answered. If you could, in the chat on the, let's see, I think it would be over here. For me it is, in the lower right. If you could just say, introduce yourself and say maybe where you're from and let us know that you're all here. I really appreciate it. And then we'll go ahead and jump in. So one of the first questions, Christy asked a couple of questions, and one of them was thoughts on waterproof hiking boots. And, I think waterproof hiking boots, I actually have, my boots are waterproof hiking boots. I also have a pair of trail runners that I use mostly for day hikes, and those are not waterproof. My personal preference, especially for Southern California, is just something that's more breathable than waterproof. My feet tend to get really hot. And if you have a waterproof boot, that means that it's going to trap moisture inside as well. So as your feet perspire, they're just going to get kind of soaked with perspiration. So, so CXC Beast says hi from Long Beach. Georgina, hi from Bakersfield. Wow, that's cool. So back to waterproof boots. Yeah, the pair that I have, boots that I have, they are waterproof. The good thing about them is that they're good in different kinds of conditions. Like if you're in snow or slush or rain, it's kind of nice to have those. But you just have to be aware, kind of weigh the trade-offs. If you're going to be doing mostly hiking on dry trails, not so much snow or not so much, crossing creeks and that sort of thing, then you might not need a pair of waterproof boots. A lot of people on Mount Wilson this year have been surprised by the water levels in the creeks. And there's a number of creek crossings, particularly if you go back to Sturtevant Falls from Chantry Flats. And so it can either be really tricky to try to, cross, rock hop across the creeks without getting your feet wet, or you just kind of, the nice thing about waterproof boots is you can just kind of step in it. As long as it doesn't go over the collar of your boot, then you're good. So that's kind of my thoughts on waterproof hiking boots. It's kind of a love-hate thing. I have some, I use them, I like them for certain applications, but most of the time for the day hiking that I do, I'm using a pair of really breathable trail runners or trail shoes that do the job for me. Let's see, we have a few more people saying hi. Kate, joining from Palmdale. Hi, Kate. And Christy is here. I think that was your question about waterproof boots. Hopefully you caught that. The good thing is that if you didn't, we're going to have a replay of this video, so we'll post that online shortly after. My lovely wife, Joan, has joined. Hello, Joan. And let's go down to the next question. Current conditions on top of Mount Wilson. I can't say specifically right now. I can say the couple things you can do. One, and I'm going to switch over and do a screen share real quickly just to kind of show what you can do to get those conditions. So bear with me for just a second. I'm going to share I'm going to try this, and hopefully this will work. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you can see my screen. And I'm looking at SoCal Hiker. I'm going to go to the 6-pack of peaks menu, and I'm going to scroll down to Mount Wilson and select that. So we're going to take a look and see just kind of what kind of information is on the trail guide itself that can tell you a little bit about Mount Wilson and what the current conditions are. So the first thing, we can see the pictures, the trail map, all the things that are part of the guides on SoCal Hiker. One of the things that's kind of nice is that as you move your cursor over this elevation guide, it's going to move the icon around the map so you can see exactly where the high points are, where the downhill is, and so forth. We have a bunch of pictures. I'm going to skip through those and get down to the forecast. So this weather forecast will give you some idea of what the weather is like and the current conditions are like, today and then the next 3 days looking forward. We also have a webcam link on here under additional Mount Wilson resources. And when we click that, you'll see this is from the solar tower right at the top. Obviously it's black because it's dark right now, but during the day you'd be able to see kind of what this was like, and you can see this is it's got the date, the time and date stamp on there, and it's updated every 2 minutes. So those are a couple good ways to do that. The third thing that I'll share is simply going to, let's see, we'll go back to that 6-pack menu, and I go down to logged hikes. This is showing all of the challengers and the hikes that they've already logged. And this is a good tip, not just for Mount Wilson, but for the other peaks as well. And by default, it's showing the most recent first. Most of these are going to be Wilson right now, and you'll see that change as the snow starts melting. But I can click on Mount Wilson to see just Mount Wilson trips. And it's showing it by date. So if we can say, we'll pick Live to Tell the Tale. And it's going to load that. You can see the date of the hike listed on there and the challenger name of who posted that. So this was this is challenger Lisa. I can click on her name to look at her profile, and I can see the date, March 19th. So that was just a few days ago. We get a pretty good idea of what the conditions are like. And if you have questions, you might even ask Lisa. So you could go in here and say, hey, Lisa, great photos. What were the creek crossings like? Or whatever you want to ask, you can do that and post a comment to that, and she'll get a notification and can reply right on here. One thing I want to point out here is you'll see this on some of the hike logs. Some of the pictures are upside down or sideways, and what this is something that we know about. It's actually a bug in WordPress when people use their mobile device to upload photos to the hike log. WordPress doesn't respect the EXIF information for orientation. And there's a fix coming down the pike that hopefully will fix it for all of the site and all of these hike logs. So I haven't gone in and tried to manually mess with it because that fix is coming. But if you upload them from your computer, I think, knock on wood, it works okay. Anyhow, those are a couple tips for getting current conditions. First, check the hike guide, look at the weather forecast, check the webcam or other links that are in there. Sometimes we'll have those. And then also check the hike logs to see what, the photos and reports from people who've been up there recently. Three great ways to get to that information. Let's see, Krista, is Krista here? I'm looking to see. Don't see her necessarily online right now, but that's okay. She asked about my perspective on doing San Jacinto in the winter or summer. Is the snow and snowshoe trail easier or harder than summertime trails? It's absolutely harder. no question about that. It's a whole different animal, basically. You know, you have the navigation is more difficult. There can be tracks, especially at San Jacinto, there can be tracks going all over the place that aren't necessarily following a route or a trail, just people rambling around or, you know, forging their own trail through the snow. And so it can be really deceiving. You know, it'd be really easy if you aren't able to navigate without regard for what the tracks are on the ground, to get led astray and get lost. So that's definitely harder. Your travel time is going to be longer because basically your speed with whether you're using traction devices or snowshoes, it's gonna drop by about 1 mile per hour. So if you're normally doing, you know, 2.5 miles an hour, you might do 1.5 miles an hour. If you're doing 2 miles an hour, you might do 1 mile an hour. So it's definitely more work in snow. I did San Jacinto in the snow last January for the January of 2016 for the first time, and it was quite an experience. I actually had micro spikes, trekking poles. I had brought snowshoes and left them in the car because I didn't know, I thought there would be enough traffic on the trail since it had been over a week since the last snow that there would be a pretty good trail already cut through the snow. And that was really not the case. There was in the valley, but once you got past Round Valley, that was not the case. And I did a lot of post-holing. Post-holing is when you step on the snow and you sink in, maybe up to your knee, sometimes all the way up to your groin, and that really slows you down. And it takes a lot of energy because you're having to step up and over and sinking in, and it's miserable. So it was a long day, but it is a lot of fun. I love experiencing the mountains in the snow, but it is a whole different thing. You have to be prepared for winter mountaineering conditions in some cases. You have to be aware of avalanche conditions and how to detect those and how to avoid them. A lot of different other considerations. So for most people who are doing the 6-pack, they're doing it when things dry out. If there's patches of snow, that's fine because you can kind of get right through those or around them if you need to. But when the mountains are completely snow covered, it's a whole different beast. So Natalie asked about our How to Snowshoe article, and have I considered leading a snowshoe trek with a small group? I have not. I've done some snowshoeing and I've really enjoyed it. That would be a lot of fun to do sometime, and I may. When I first created the 6-pack of peaks and my first times hiking the 6-pack myself, I actually led some other folks on those trips. And I might do something like that also later this year. So there, kind of keep your eyes on SoCal Hiker for any announcements on that. If there's an opportunity for us to do something, there might be a few people who get a chance to join me and do that. Won't probably be snowshoeing at that point, but it still can be a lot of fun. Snowshoeing, a snowshoe trek would be a lot of fun. It's a tough thing to schedule because you have to really choose the time. In Southern California in particular, it's a tough thing to schedule. The first time Jonah and I went snowshoeing was up at San Jacinto. And I think the easiest way to do that's a great place to start because you can drive out to Palm Springs and take the tram up to the top. And from there, you can just basically walk down into the Long Valley and then put on your snowshoes and wander around. Chances are you may not need them because a lot of people travel there. So unless there's been fresh snow and a good dump of it, then snowshoes are just kind of, it's kind of a fun thing to experiment with, but maybe not all that necessary. So you have to watch the conditions. It's a tough thing to schedule. It's something you have to kind of do at the last minute. Watch the weather forecasts, watch for snow forecasts in the mountains, and San Jacinto is another one where they have webcams up at Long Valley, which is right near the mountain station for the tram, where you can see kind of if there's snow on the ground, is it deep, is it snowing now, that kind of thing. So I would recommend that. The other thing, and this kind of goes with a question that CXC Beast asked about hiking groups, is look for some groups to do some of these excursions with as well. I mentioned that when I first did the six pack, I led some folks on those hikes, and that was through a meetup group down in Orange County called Hiking OC. And that group still is there. I haven't been leading hikes with them in quite a long time, but the group is still there. They do a lot of great hikes. There's a lot of other meetup groups who do great hikes and other types of excursions like snowshoeing, maybe cross-country skiing in certain places, mountaineering, mountain climbing, those kinds of things. So it's a great way for you to kind of get an introduction and to do that with a group of people who may have been there before, which is a nice way to experience it the first time. Let's see, K-Town, you asked about, Kate, you asked about, do the various peaks have one trail to get you to the top, or are there multiple options? There are, for most of them, there are in fact multiple options. In fact, I would say for all of them, there are multiple options. Let's take Mount Wilson as a starting point. We have the routes that I list on the 6-Pack of Peaks menu on SoCal Hiker, and those are just sort of recommended routes, but you can make this your own challenge. So we have a group, Hike Beyond the Hills, led by Cecilia, and she led a group of people up Mount Wilson this year, and they bagged 2 peaks on the way up to Mount Wilson, and started in Altadena, Sierra Madre area. So there's trailheads down that side you can take. The one that I'm familiar with starts and goes up kind of like Echo Mountain, and then up to Inspiration Point, and then from Inspiration Point you can go across and over to Mount Wilson. There's a lot of different ways to do it. And one of the things that I highly recommend is that you pick up a paper map for each of those peaks, because it's going to show you, the different routes and ways to get to the peak, which is important for really a couple reasons. One, it's important for you when you're planning your hike. Which way do I want to go, and where are we going to stop for a break, and what's our turnaround point, that kind of thing. But it also gives you an escape route. It's not unusual for us to have wildfires pop up, and like we had the station fire back in 2009. If that happens, what do you do if your route back is now cut off because there's a wildfire? Well, you need to have another plan. And that's where the map is really important. Being able to, say, well, we can't go back that way. Let's take this other route to get, back to civilization. Then we'll figure out from there how to get our car and that sort of thing. So get those. I personally like the Tom Harrison maps, and I'll put a link in the notes for this to those. They're super, super handy. They're waterproof materials, so they're very durable. They last a long time, and that's what I love, those particular maps. You can pick your own route. San Jacinto is a great example. Marion Mountain is the route that we list under the 6-Pack of Peaks menu. But last year, I summited San Jacinto starting at the tram, the Mountain Station tram, which is about a 12-mile out and back or round trip. You can do Cucamonga. Most people do it from Icehouse Canyon and go up to the saddle and then follow around Ontario up to the peak. But you can also do it from the East Fork and come up that way. So there's another route to get there. And there's actually some other less official routes, but there's at least two official routes that you can use to get there. San Bernardino is another one where most people start at the San Bernardino Trailhead, which is in Angeles Oaks, on your way to Big Bear. And but you can also take the Moimer Trail from Forest Falls, that almost near where the Vivian Creek Trailhead is for San Gorgonio. So there's a number of routes you can take to San Bernardino as well. That area right now, so there's some options that are kind of off limits until July 17th because of the fire that they had. Was it last year or the year before? I can't remember now. But there was a fire, I think it was last year, about early spring, May timeframe, and it shut down a lot of the trails. So those are supposed to be opening up, hopefully in July. And with all the rain that we've had, I suspect that they will, as soon as they've figured out, sort of what damage and down trees that there might be across the trail, that kind of thing. But that'll be interesting because that'll open up some new alternatives for both San Bernardino and San Gorgonio. So the bottom line is, yes, you can take any trail you want. This is your challenge, and we have some people who are just like super athletes, and they've been doing all kinds of. They'll do Mount Wilson, or they'll do Mount Whitney several times in a year, and they want to look for something more challenging. So they might want to do San Jacinto all the way from the bottom of Palm Springs and take Cactus to Clouds, as they call it. Most people aren't going to do that. Other people are looking for something, somewhere that's a little bit easier. So they want to, maybe they would say, well, I want to do a route that's not as long or not as steep. So there's options for you for this, and that's up to you. Let's see, we've got about 8 more minutes. Does anyone hike during the week? Okay, this kind of touches on the meetup thing. There are a lot of hiking groups that do hikes during the week. I think the challenging thing is that most of them are after work. And the great news is that because of daylight savings time, we have now a couple of hours, where you can go and hike, and the days are going to get longer for the next few months. So that becomes a real possibility. I know that the Hiking for Health and Happiness group, they do stuff during the week. I know that Shoestring Adventures does weeknight hikes, I think on Wednesdays. Hiking OC does weeknight hikes almost every night of the week. So there's a lot of options in the evenings. Not as many in the AM, but if you do check on meetup.com, you are gonna find some out there. So definitely check that out. Let's see, Georgina, you asked about trails with snow, which ones to attempt now. The sequence does not make a difference, so you can hike them in any sequence. I kind of assembled them in a sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that made sense to me because each one was a little bit higher, theoretically a little bit more difficult, although that is sort of subjective. But you can hike them in any order you want. And last year when I did the 6-pack, the first peak that I did was San Jacinto, and the second one I did was San Gorgonio. So I did them completely out of order last year, and that's totally fine. It's totally up to you. Now, snow is the big wild card here, and the thing that you have to remember is that even though that we've had some warm temperatures in Southern California and a lot of snow melt, there's still a lot of snow on those mountains, and right now they're pretty much all have snow to some degree. While you may not see the snow, for example, if you look at Cucamonga Peak from the Inland Empire and look up at it, it looks like it's pretty clear, and in fact the peak is probably snow-free. But on the back side, the north-facing side, that's where the trail is. And that's where there's a lot of snow because it doesn't get as much sunlight. And it's a steep, steep slope with a lot of snow. Not really recommended until, probably May timeframe and possibly later. I think the 2 peaks that are gonna be a little bit easier to do sooner are gonna be Mount Baldy, mainly because of the volume of traffic that it gets. I would avoid Devil's Backbone until it dries out, and it hasn't quite yet. So I'd hold off on that. There is coming up in May the Climb for Heroes event, which is a fundraiser for the Heroes Project. And I've mentioned that in the past, but they'll probably have things a path pretty well defined. Hopefully the snow will be melted. There might be a few patches here and there, but I think at that point it'd be a pretty safe bet. Today, if you were to do Mount Baldy, you might be able to do the route, the ski hut route, as they call it. So rather than taking Devil's Backbone, you go up to the Sierra Club ski hut, you go around the base of the bowl, and you follow the trail up the ridge line to the summit. That's not going up the bowl, which some mountaineers will do when there's snow on it, but it's going along the ridge line. And that's probably a pretty good bet. But again, you'll need traction devices, you need trekking poles, and you need to be aware of the actual conditions. In some cases, if it gets iced over, then it's going to be a winter mountaineering condition, and you need crampons, an ice axe, helmet, and the skills to use all that. So that's one. The other one would be San Jacinto, and that's kind of for the same reason. A lot of people use that, will hike up San Jacinto, and so the trail will get pretty well tamped down. If you follow the trail, the traditional route going basically out from Long Valley, past Round Valley, up to Wellman's Divide, and then cut back along the long switchback over to the saddle and up to the summit, you're in pretty good condition most of the way, even with some patches of snow. So very soon, I think those two will be available. Of course, it all depends on what happens with rain and whether there's more snow that hits us, which very likely can happen. 2 years ago, I was going to do Cucamonga Peak with a group of people in the middle of May, and 2 weeks earlier there was a big snowstorm in May, and it was just too treacherous for us to attempt it. We actually did make it up to Timber Mountain instead, but we had to come back and do Cucamonga another time. Let's see. Alternative trails I'd recommend to summit San Bernardino Peak. Nancy asks. The main trail from Angeles Oaks is sort of the trail right now. If you go from Moimer, you can do that. It's actually about another 1,000 feet of vertical gain, so it's a much harder hike. But that's the other route that's currently available. Once they open up some of the closed areas, then there might be some new options, and I'll have to do some research on that and see what I can find out. Kate was asking, how do you find out when somebody is leading a group? Well, there's a lot of different ways. Some of the groups, hiking groups, are on Facebook. And if you go to the SoCal Hikers, not our page, but actually our group on Facebook, that's a great place to connect with a lot of those folks. And I'll put a link into the notes in here where you can find that. If you're not a member already, you can join up that little community and just kind of put feelers out there. Is anyone interested in hiking, or are there any groups that I can join? We actually have a document in that SoCal Hikers group that lists hiking groups in Southern California, so that's a great place to start. Let's see, podcast I recommend listening to for hiking and outdoors related. One in particular that I really love is called The Trail Show, and they typically focus on long trails, like, well, for example, the Pacific Crest Trail, which is 2,600 miles long. But it's very entertaining, and they're just really into hiking culture, backpacking culture, so they love that. There's another one called, I think it's called The First 40, and it's about basically starting out with hiking. And so those two provide a nice sort of counterbalance. And I'll put links to both of those. But the Trail Show, very irreverent. It's maybe an acquired taste. They'll often have a beer of the week that they're tasting while they're recording the show. And there's a group of, I think, 4 of them that are involved, and they have guests on regularly. It's really a lot of fun. And the other one is a husband-wife couple, and they have a couple of kids, and they started up the podcast basically to kind of chronicle their own experience and what they learned as they started out. So it gives a good perspective from that side. Let's see, Climb for Heroes. Is there a team t-shirt? We're actually going to put together some team t-shirts, and I think we have some sponsors that are going to help us fund those, so nothing to purchase on that day. As we get a little bit closer, we're going to kind of try to nail it down who's participating about a month ahead, so that we can put in an order and get those back and have that all ready to go. Wow, we're already up to 8:31. We had a lot of questions, and hopefully I got to them all. I'm kind of looking back through here. Looks like we hit most of them. If you have additional questions, I want to really encourage you to go to the forums at socalhiker.net, and you can ask your questions. You'll see that there's sort of a small core group of people who are pretty active in there, and they're organizing hikes, and they're planning when they're going to do Wilson or when they're going to do Baldy and that sort of thing. So that's a great place for you to do that, and it's also a great place for you to ask these kinds of questions and get those answers. So check that out. I'm going to wrap this session up. I really appreciate the fact that you all dialed in and joined tonight. This is a lot of fun for me to be able to connect with you, and I'm hoping that in the future we can do maybe like a guest host or something on the air. So if you have ideas and somebody you'd love to hear from, or maybe just some expertise that you'd like to hear from, let me know, and I'll see what we can do about getting them on this and have some fun that way. So I appreciate you again, appreciate you joining. I mentioned one last thing that I want to show you, and I mentioned this in the email. There was a new badge for people who have signed up to do the Summit for Someone. So I'm going to show you, this is my profile on socalhiker.net, and I don't think you're seeing it right now. Let me see if I can share my screen. Share. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing this. So this is my profile. These are all of my badges. So it shows historically badges from last year. I was a finisher. I'm a challenger this year. I'm on the Climb for Heroes Team SoCal Hiker, and I'm doing the Summit for Someone here for Big City Mountaineers. What is that, you may ask? If you look in your welcome kit, you'll see a link to something that looks like socalhiker.net go/VCM. That talks a little bit about what we're doing this year. 4% of all the registrations right off the top goes to Big City Mountaineers, which does a great job. It's an awesome nonprofit that gets inner city youth out and doing some awesome outdoor experiences so that they really have an appreciation for the outdoors, and will help support that going forward. This will tell you how you can join and set up your own fundraiser for this. And we have a number of people who have already done that. So if we take a look here, you can see we've got, David Vellino and Jesse and Yvonne have already signed up. There's no minimum fundraiser required. You can put, you set your own goal if you want, and however much is just appreciated. And everybody who signs up here is going to get the badge that I showed right here. So I'm summiting for someone for Big City Mountaineers. It's going to show up on your profile and just kind of give you a little feather in your cap to go with it. So that'll leave you with that thought. And until then, happy trails, and I'll look for you on online and on the site and in the forums. Have a great week, everybody, or have a great month, and look forward to seeing you next time. Let's see if I can figure out how to get back to this. Oh, here we go. All right. Have a great week, and we'll see you. Happy trails, everybody.